Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm excited to have Karie and Brandon here to talk about bioregionalism and the Turtle Island Congress. As usual, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So, Brandon, I think you're going first. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. My name is Brandon Letsinger. I'm here on Vashon Island in the Salish Sea Cascadia bioregion, which is kind of up on the northern Pacific Rim. And I'm the executive director of the Department of Bioregion and then also co-administrator for a program called Regenerate Cascadia. And thank you so much for having me. And Karie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody, I'm Karie Crisp. I've known David for a number of years now, and I am a scholar and an activist focused on the bioregional movement, and one of the organizers of this event that we have coming up in just about a month called the Turtle Island Bioregional Congress. Happy to be here with you all to share about it today.
And are you sure you're not a biochemist? No, just kidding. Sorry.
Maybe next lifetime.
Private joke. Yeah. From 1 minute before we recorded. Anyway, turn it back to you, Brandon.
Great. Well, I think just to start, I think for an overview of the day, I think we were just going to give a short introduction to what is bioregionalism, what is a bioregion, and then I think we're very excited that Karie will share more about the Turtle Island Bioregional Congress, which is coming up in September in Oregon. And give me just a moment as I share my screen. Yeah. So to start, I just thought I would really start with an open question. And that's really that at a time marked by the erosion of trust, truth, and the fragmentation of our communities and ecosystems, new approaches to governance and right livelihood are not just a preference, but a necessity. The challenges we face, from ecological degradation to social polarization, cannot be solved by the same top-down, siloed systems that have created them. Everywhere we look, it is clear that people and communities are doing the work. So, how do we come together to visualize, connect, and support work already happening? How do we grow relationships, trust, and the social infrastructure we need to make shared decisions, coordinate, and set priorities, not just in one place, but across an entire watershed, a bioregion, a continent, an entire planet? For those who aren't familiar, I think we're sharing today about a ethic and idea and movement that's been growing for more than 50 years. It's an idea called bioregionalism. Very simply, it just means find your place on the planet, dig in, and take responsibility from there. It's rooted in an idea called bioregions, life places, looking at a place and reconnecting with a place based on the realities of how we live there rather than arbitrary lines on maps. It's also a way of living and a recognition of how humans have lived for the majority of human existence, where we have lived responsibly and ethically within place. And it's an idea that's been growing for more than 50 years. And so, in this modern tradition, a couple people I'd love to point to that kind of are really the predecessors from which this movement was built is Donella Meadows. She was the author to Limits of Growth in 1972, one of the founders of the Peloton Group, and then also one of the thinkers that really helped lead to the idea of bioregional learning centers and how we learn in place. Another early forerunner of this idea of bioregionalism is Raymond Dasman. Worked at UNESCO as a conservation and ecologist who worked with Aldo Leopold, taught at University Santa Cruz, and it was really his work. He helped coin the term biodiversity in the 1970s, and then did some of the first maps of biogeographic realms and provinces that would be adopted by the United Nations and groups like One Earth or the WWF. And then this modern way that we're going to be talking about bioregionalism really was grown through a group that emerged out of San Francisco in the 1970s, the Planet Drum Foundation, Peter Berg, Judy Goldhaft, and a very rich movement of poetry and artists And it was really Peter Berg coming together with Raymond Dossmann, publishing an article in 1978 called Re-inhabiting California, that really launched how we will be talking about bioregionalism today. And this movement has been growing through poetry, through artwork, through education, through sciences. And so, just to start, what exactly do we mean by bioregion? As I mentioned earlier, a bioregion just simply means life place. It is a holistic way of thinking about where we live, not in silos, but everything coming together, many different layers of ecosystems, physical boundaries, cultural realities that can go into the economic and the political, all coming to get together to work about how we talk about an area. I think an important takeaway is that no matter where you live in a bioregion. But life place doesn't just mean human bioregions. We're also talking about what is the bioregion of a gray whale? What is the bioregion of a salmon or a migratory bird? And when you start to think about the world and these interconnected frameworks, you start to realize just how complex that system can be. And so when we talk about bioregions, we can really start deep. We start with hard lines, geology, a story of deep time. And from that, we start to talk about many different layers. So we can see how these hard lines interact with wind, with soil, with rain, with all of these other different weather patterns. It's about looking at our watersheds. So tracing a drop of water from where it lands on the continental crest all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. One of the big things about bioregions is unlike arbitrary lines on maps, the boundaries are visible, they're real. You can see them from space. Um, More than just the physical realities, we can start to talk about the ecosystems. So we can talk about our forests. We can talk about what's the bioregion and range of a salmon. And over again, you will start to see these same shapes emerging. It can also be have we lived in place since time immemorial? And then how have the ways that we have lived in these places adapted to celebrate these unique differences and celebration of place? This also then starts to impact how we live today. So, how do we talk to each other? How do we spend money? It affects our transportation corridors and how we commute. It affects our energy and how we can work together around that. And then as we zoom out, we start to see how this all interconnects and interrelates. So a series of nested scale from watershed to ecoregion to bioregion. And then we actually start to see what are the other bioregions of North America? What about the biosphere of Earth? And what's very powerful about these nested frameworks is that they can help break down these large, scary, intangible issues like climate change. And you break it down to a local level where every person can walk out their front door and get active and engaged about issues they care about. And then you can actually have a measurable impact. Are things getting better? Are things getting worse each year? And we can actually start to talk about, are we being successful? And so why does any of this really matter? It matters because if we want to really seriously talk about the issues facing our planet, no one state or province or country will be able to deal with these issues alone. Nature acts bioregionally on the scale of watersheds, ecoregions, and bioregions. And so, if we want to be serious about solving these problems, so must we. And lastly, I just want to say that we are not doing this alone. Our real provocation and question is how can we come together to build a better future with targeted regenerative interventions and a strategy to work together? And so with that, I'd love to turn it over to Karie.
Thank you, Brandon. So I'm here to talk to you about the Turtle Island Bioregional Congress, which is happening only 1 month from now in Cascadia in Vernonia, Oregon, which is about an hour northwest of Portland. And I would like to invite your community to consider sending a couple people up to that because I think it could really fit well with what you all are doing. But what a Congress is it's not like a typical Congress. It's actually a co-created event that actually, can you go back? to the other slide, Brandon, that's uniting a lot of place-based allies to strengthen into what Brandon was talking about and to start organizing more effectively in these ecological and cultural ways across bioregions. So you can go on to the next slide, and these are just a few of us who are working on it right now. Excuse me. Myself and Brandon, Bill Bowie, Claire Brodeur, and Lily Falconer are the core organizers, but there are dozens of other people who are also helping us out on this. And it's been about 2 years in the making. So you can go on to the next one, Brandon. There we go. As Brandon was saying, this bioregional idea is not really a new idea at all. It's a way that humans have lived since time immemorial. And even though it has a more current tradition coming out of the Planet Drum Foundation and others, it's it's kind of a return to realizing that the Earth is this very powerful, intelligent 4.5 billion year old being who's figured out how to make life, and we have best be aligned with that as much as possible going forward. So it's kind of a homecoming. I think of it that way, as like coming home to the reality that we're all embedded in this beautiful planet and very much interconnected. Going on to the next one, Brandon. And so here's a diagram that pretty easily shows the trajectory of the movement over the last 50 years or so. In 1976, the activist Peter Berg that Brandon spoke about wrote this manifesto called Amble Towards Continent Congress, where he was trying to get people interested in this idea of coming together with the continent in a way that will help us move toward a more ecologically sustainable existence. And so from that, it kind of spurred this idea of the Bioregional Congress. And the first one that happened was actually more of a regional one in the Ozarks. But then that sort of proliferated out into this continental movement. And there were 10 of these previous congresses that happened before, although the last one was in 2009. So there's been a 17-year gap. And the folks that you saw on the previous screen are some of the ones who are trying to revive this tradition because we're realizing that it's actually a very effective way to bring people together that are across many different movements to come together to see if we can solidify some strategies about how we want to move forward. And since 2009, I wouldn't say that the movement has stopped at all. I would say there was a lot of return to people's own bioregions to do the actual work. And many seeds were planted, and now those are flowering all over the world. As you can see here, just a couple of examples. In the Amazon headwaters, they have a 2030 bioregional plan, for example. And then Brandon with the Cascadia group are doing many things like a BioFi conference. R3.0 is doing a lot of work around bioregional confluences. And then, of course, we're going to have this bioregional congress that's happening next month. So a lot is happening now. Although this kind of more modern interpretation of the movement started in North America, it's really proliferating around the world. You can go on to the next one, Brandon. And the point of this is that we want to try to organize more effectively in these self-organized fractal layers of bioregional governance that, it's not that we're trying to override necessarily national governments or local governments. It's just an idea, a way of looking at an area more effectively in terms of like what are the actual features and the limits of the regions, and how can we interface with existing governments too to try to more effectively create policies and such that are going to move us forward in the right way. And then Indigenous sovereignty is a big piece of this as well. These are ideas that obviously are still evident in a lot of those traditions, and we are very much centering those voices within the Congress as well. And then another big piece of this is just simply increasing our connection to each other and our solidarity amongst ourselves, and really making a lot of friendships and lifelong connections that will surely last for decades afterwards. And we are planning to, for this event in particular, we're targeting around having about 300 people there. And we would love to have some of you all join us. Next one, Brandon. Just to give you an idea about what to expect. So, as I mentioned, this is not a typical conference. It's really like a congress in a verb-like sense, which means coming together in this co-created way. So, there's going to be some participant-led workshops. There'll be some kind of elder councils, things like that, open space opportunities, as well as like plenty of arts, music, and celebration as well. Next one, Brandon. And so the location for the event is at this place called the Camp Cedar Ridge, which, like I said, is about an hour northwest of Portland. It's a beautiful place. There's a beautiful stage set up in the cedars that will have some improv theater as well as other talks. There's river access for people to take some downtime there if they'd like. Plenty of outdoor spaces to mingle. There's a labyrinth and it's going to be amazing food as well. We're really looking forward to having folks there for this event. Next one, Brandon. And then we want to open it up to questions, whatever you might have, but I just want to let you know about a couple of resources that you could check out afterwards. This is our website, tibc11.earth. And then we have a YouTube channel slash at tibc11 where you can find a short 9-minute video that helps sort of set this whole movement in context of its history, as well as what we're trying to achieve with the Congress. And then there are several information sessions that we've already recorded there as well that you can check out. So with that, that's my final slide, and we're happy to open it up to questions.
Whoops, I should probably come off mute. That was great. Thank you both. You make great slides. You explain things so well. I'm going to defer to the group to see who's got some questions for those who haven't been here in a while or maybe the first time. We do ask that you actually ask a question. We are excited to help you promote your other stuff in another format, but we'd like to just take advantage of our limited time with Karie and Brandon to ask some questions and to share the space as people keep it to one question. And then if everybody has asked something, then we'll go do another round. So I know we have an inquisitive group here today. They're usually full of good questions. Who'd like to kick us off? Dorothy, I knew I could count on you.
I just would love to hear more about the role of Indigenous people in the planning and in the roots of all of this and at the conference itself.
Yeah. Do you want to start, Brandon, or you want me to start?
Why don't you start and then I'll respond after you.
Okay. Yeah, so absolutely. We actually have an Indigenous program director, Shai, who's from some Indigenous tribes up in Alaska. She has mixed ancestry as well, but she's helping us coordinate with many Indigenous folks in terms of incorporating them into the whole event in their leadership. So that may range from having an actual opening ceremony where they share some of their traditions, as well as there'll be talks. For example, there's an Indigenous matriarch panel that will be held. But then throughout the entire Congress, there's a chance for Indigenous folks to lead in whichever way they like. There's other participant-led workshops that are happening. And then also at the very end of the Congress, we'll have a space for Indigenous reflections at the very end as well. Yeah, and everything in between. So it's very much we're trying to really center that this go around.
Yeah, I would also like to just say to help maybe put this more in context that I'm here on Vashon Island in the Salish Sea in the Cascadia bioregion, and Cascadia has a history that goes back about 40 years, and it was also formed through many of these early bioregional congresses. There were two regional Cascadia bioregional congresses in 1986, 1987. And then there was actually a North American Bioregional Congress, the third NABC, and that was actually held on Squamish territory in Lillooet, I think on Vancouver Island in Canada, in British Columbia. But certainly here, Indigenous involvement has played a critical role in the bioregional movement since its inception. So especially in the early congresses, there was, I think so, Vi Hilbert was the last remaining, I think, knowledge holder and original Lachute Seed speaker for the Southern Lachute Seed. And she played a really critical part for a lot of the early bioregional congresses on the U.S. side. And then Lee and Ayanna Miracle were Northern Lachute Seed speakers that really carried a lot of those traditions through. And so there's been this really important current, I think, of Indigenous sovereignty, bioregional, place-based, and also regenerative kind of movement building that's been very important.
And thank you. Who else would like to go? Brian says he wants to wait till later, but if nobody else goes, Brian, you might be up next. Okay, Brian.
All right, thanks a lot. Okay, thanks. Really good talk. Okay, as David just said, I'm Brian Dowling. I'm with the California Donut Economics Coalition. And one of the things I saw that we have in common is the planetary boundaries. And the most important planetary boundary for me, and probably for CalDEC too, is climate change and biodiversity. And I am very concerned about the direction the state of California is taking in terms of climate change. And next year, the California Air Resources Board will be putting out their 2027 scoping plan, which is what's supposed to be defining how we're going to be addressing climate change. This is something that's authorized, required by AB 32, which started this whole thing off. I want to first ask questions to make sure I've got my understanding right. As I understand it, Cascadia is a region which is part of Northern California and then goes north from there. And that is part of the Bioregions Congress that's going up next month in September. Do I have that right?
Yes, I think so.
I think you've got it.
Okay, great. All right. But the Congress itself involves many more bioregions than that. California, if I remember right, has about 10 bioregions, but I suspect that not all bioregions really have a center of governance or really are part of this. There's just certain bioregions that are going to be participating. Do I have that right as well?
We can't guarantee that every bioregion would be there. That's for
Okay,
sure.
but all bioregions don't actually have representation, or I mean, there's some that are just sitting there naturally and nobody's really dealing with them. Am I right in assuming that?
Yes, though I would say that California is kind of I would say, not only was it the birthplace of I think this kind of modern bioregional movement and push, but I think also a lot of the current organizing is led by people throughout California, whether it's kind of the Shasta area or whether it's the Bay Delta or whether it's kind of more in that southern area. And I think that there are these efforts for these. I think there have been bioregional unconferences that have been happening in Berkeley, and then I think and then everything even to do with what we've been talking about with bioregional finance, which does talk about a well-being economy, donut economics, flourishing economies. Really, I mean, a lot of that has taken root from around California, actually.
Right.
So.
We're seeing that from our side as well. We're seeing donut cities coming in from Mendocino, from Shasta, from all those places. And if you think in terms of a three horizon framework, you guys are the good framework. Your guys are what we're trying to go for. And a lot of what we have now existing is what we're trying to get away from. But there's still that second pathway of trying to put those two together. How do you guys see yourselves, one, working with urban areas? Because there's always the dependency somewhere along those lines. At least the urban areas are depending upon you guys. How do you work with them, especially trying to convince urban areas the importance of biodiversity? How do you work together in addressing climate change? Because climate change is a global thing, not any particular region. And how do you see yourselves working with the state of California? You said you don't want to try to replace anything, if I understand you right, but you still have to have some kind of influence with those local and state governments to get them to see, hey, you guys need to be thinking this way. And I guess the other question is, how can donut economics help you do what you do? Because I think it has to be donut economics helping you and what you're trying to do. What can we do in order to make that more viable? That's it.
Yeah, I'll take a first stab at that. So I was pretty heavily involved with the California Jobs First initiative, where they were actually trying to somewhat decentralize economic planning to the regions. And although it doesn't exactly line up with the bioregional map that California already created in 1991, it's kind of close. And so I feel like that is like a really solid first step in the way for us to help keep moving forward with the bioregional framework. In terms of urban areas, yeah, absolutely. Every city is in a bioregion, but no city abides by its natural boundaries, I would say, right? There's a lot of this kind of global economy very much drives cities to a certain extent, right? There's a lot of import, export, et cetera. And so, yeah, what you're talking about is like it's a complete reframing around how we need to be living. And um, I think what you're all doing with trying to influence voters and such, I think there's an opportunity here to really possibly reframe in a different way to start asking people like Californians especially to think seriously about what a bioregional framework can mean to them. And so I've even explored the idea, for example, of doing like a bioregional donut. I think we can totally do that for the Bay Area. They're already collaborating. They already have planning agencies that work around the Bay. The counties around the Bay are already working together. So it's not so much of a stretch necessarily to ask them to work seriously in a bioregional way. But yeah, we are inviting, for example, people from the Land Use and Climate Innovation Group to the Congress, so we can begin having these real conversations that I think we all need to have. But it's a journey. We're not going to get there overnight for sure, but just yeah, we need to start making those inroads, and we are going to have to change the way we govern. It's what we have now is not working, and people are at different levels of accepting that. But I think California and the West Coast in particular of the US are farther along than many.
Right.
I would also just add, I mean, I think what Karie was saying, I think David McCloskey describes cities as, especially a lot of these larger cities, as they are almost like outposts of global capital and monoculture. So they live outside of place. And so a big question for us is how do we start to bring our activities back into place? And I think as Karie was already alluding to, it really can also come down to a matter of scale. But I also just think that oftentimes when people hear bioregionalism, they maybe assume that it is only a rural, situation or something like that. And actually, I think it's always been very focused on urban living and how do we act, because that's actually where most people live. It's certainly the part that's most out of balance. Peter Berg very famously had, I think, the Green Cities project in San Francisco, which was really like kind of an early and leading situation. But and while I'm more, closer to Seattle, I'll just use an example that one of our most interesting groups, I think, is based in the Duwamish River Valley. And I think that that's it's the most heavily urbanized area in King County, probably in the Cascadia bioregion. It's the home of the Seattle port. It's one of the three deep water ports on the West Coast. Um, I think and what I find very interesting there is that every different layer of this conversation is present in that conversation, which is how do we pull this heavily industrialized urban area, of which the Duwamish Longhouse still stands, for whom Seattle was named after, but they have no federal recognition. To it's a Superfund site because of Boeing and the production that they did. It's the home of the port. You have city, county. It is a frontline community by living there. The life expectancy is 7 years less than any other neighborhood. And so what's really exciting is that we have a very powerful group that's working and integrating to talk about how do we actually create a regenerative future for this area. And it is all low lying. It's on flats, and so it will be impacted by rising oceans and all of these other very important issues. And so all of these are very bioregional. And I will just say what's really nice is that people who are involved with donut economic groups are also leading the way up here. And I think what Karie was saying is it really is that matter of scale of how do we shift that to a broader, more bioregional perspective that can truly be regenerative and sustainable within a large enough framework to have that conversation.
Thank you. Okay, just a couple more things. I put my email in the chat. can you send me some information about that 1991 map that Karie was talking about? Um, and are you two on Hilo by chance?
Yes, we are. And yes,
Okay.
I will send you the map.
Right. Okay. I've got a bioregional donut group on Hilo that I've been trying to get going. We
Oh,
got a few people going on there too. Um, uh, it, I know there's one more thing I'm supposed to be asking in my
Well,
brain.
Brian, maybe we could
I'll
let
go.
go
Okay.
around the horn a little bit and then
I'll come back.
come back to you.
All
So
right.
I've got a question that's sort of a follow-up to Brian's for you, Brandon. Could you describe a little more like some of the goals for Regenerate Cascadia over the next year to help me understand a little bit more uh, tangible? Because you did a great job of explaining the whole giant map, but what does it look like on a very day-to-day or annual level?
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a great question. Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar, we also do run a program called Regenerate Cascadia. Regenerate Cascadia started in October of 2023. We started with we called it a bioregional activation tour. We traveled to 14 communities in 30 days. We met with more than 1,000 people, and worked with about 80 different people on both the US and Canadian side of the border to really look at each different landscape hosted, kind of site visits to different regenerative projects, dam removals. Got to have talks by people doing regenerative work in those landscapes, and all geared around what would it take to actually regenerate a watershed or a bioregion. And what became quickly clear is that people are doing the work in the landscapes, but they're not being supported. People are working in silos, they are burning out. And then it was really exciting to see that reframed in this idea of regeneration, where people can really walk out, get their hands dirty, see positive impacts very quickly, that can actually be a very big optimistic driver. And so since then, we've launched a learning journey through the Design School for Regenerating Earth. It's a 6-month learning journey. We've done it for 3 years now with a cohort of about 40 to 100 people. And then we are working with different landscape groups to basically build the social infrastructure and come together at a scale of a watershed or landscape to build in the governance, the decision making, and then also to be identifying a portfolio of projects of people that are doing that regenerative work in a landscape. And then very quickly also found that they need to be supported. And so we have a kind of a parallel program that we're working with called Bioregional Finance. And so we're actually exploring how are we building the economic vehicles that we need that don't exist yet. I would say, to the last speaker's point, we are certainly operating, I think, in a second horizon framework and model. And so we are looking at how do we build the vehicles that can flow money into communities at the scale that we need? And then how can communities be coming together to be creating these regeneration strategies? How are they also defining their own context-based indicators? We can talk about planetary thresholds, but we can also talk about that every different community will have certain unique aspects of place that will be different. And that can be quantitative and qualitative, but the people who live in a place know the things that make it special. And we are really interested in everything being left off of our traditional maps today, our Google Maps, our other things. And so everything that's being left off of those is what we're really concerned with.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing, and thank you, Simon. Good to see you. Go for it.
Yeah, thanks, David, and thanks for bringing this issue forward. We had so I'm from the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and really interested in the connections, and so maybe building a little bit on Brian's question about the sort of the ideas of how this links to the economy. And we did a series of comparative studies of bioregions in Colombia prior to the biodiversity COP a couple of years ago, and came up with a series of findings that around sort of how the diverse economic activities and organizational forms ended up becoming much more ecocentric because they were guided by the geographical dimensions of a bioregion rather than municipal boundaries. And that also, in addition to restoring ecosystems and biodiversity. They also generated jobs and had sort of social and economic benefits alongside the environmental ones, which we've talked about. And additional plus add-ons of that are important in terms of social cohesion, local ownership, and generating this sort of sense of connection and belonging, which also has economic benefits and sort of community wealth building. The sense was that sort of bioregionalism is also not only a means of reversing a situation of degradation and decline, but actually of transforming the dominant economic paradigm. And it offers a new way of envisioning the economy and society in relationship and the relationship of both with nature. So just it's a very expansive question, but it's what are some of the economic dimensions of bioregions that you're exploring and that you're seeing, that you're sensing from your experience?
Sorry, was that for Brandon or me or both?
Yeah, either.
Um, yeah, I would say like there's several like regenerative economists who are pretty involved with the Congress right now. One is Samantha Power, another one is Guy Harrington, who was supposed to be here today and sends her regrets for not being able to make it. But their work, I suggest checking them out. And then more specifically around economics, like I think these are conversations that are beginning to form in a lot of places, but aren't necessarily like super concrete yet. I think with what CalDEC is doing is a great kind of foray into that. Even with California and trying to decentralize economic planning to the regions, realizing that they've got this like massive state that they can't possibly manage really from a top-down perspective, even though I think that still tries to happen anyway. But there's this realization beginning to form, at least I think that there needs to be much more of a bottoms-up approach, and I think that's what a bioregional framework offers is that like how do we really get and this is a question maybe for your group to explore more, like how do we have more grassroots engagement with like people who are really on the ground and really experiencing um, a lot of concerning things happening, typically in marginalized communities, especially. So, like bringing their voices more into the mix. It's not an easy thing, obviously, but I think things like the donut map helps to visualize what we're dealing with, at least, and so we can begin to have a grasp. I think that's the most powerful thing about the donut is that it provides a very visual way of conceptualizing what actually we're dealing with, not only in terms of like the systems that need to change too, but like starting to tap into the inner dimensions of like this is also a relationship issue, right? This is how we relate to each other. This is how we relate to the earth. Um, and the way that humans have typically with modern society thinks of themselves as dominators over the earth, and we can just do whatever we want. But the Earth is a 4.5 billion year old genius, basically, and what we're reckoning with, I think, is beginning to tune back into and to remember that. But how we do that in each of our places, that's a much more it's a long journey, I think. So I'd love to hear what you all actually have to say about how can you take what you're doing with Wellbeing Economy Alliance and help move in a more bioregional way.
I think Kirsten might be raising her hand to answer that or to ask a question. So, Kirsten, go for it.
Yeah, but well, it's sort of both. It's a question. I mean, I have kind of two questions. One is really kind of a bigger question about what actually has to change with our economic dynamics in order to do bioregioning. Like big picture, like what do you see? But more specifically into the point that you just were making, some of us are reaching out right now to city and county governments, mayors, city councils, and county governments about moving toward a well-being economy. What would you suggest that we recommend to them, to mayors, to city council? Like how is there an association of bioregional mayors or, is like, what can what can we share with them to encourage them to start thinking this way? And is there any action that you would recommend that we ask them to take?
Yeah, maybe Brandon, you have some examples in Cascadia that you can point to.
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, I think bioregionalism in Cascadia was embraced, I mean, going back to the 1990s there was a Cascadia Mayor's Council. There's also, I think one of the big challenges we face is a cross-border binational dynamic. And so we actually have a Pacific Northwest Economic Region, which is like one of the largest examples of paradiplomacy, I think, in the world, which is a body of elected officials and other things. We also have a Cascadia Innovation Corridor. There's university partnerships. I think a lot also goes to maybe this idea of commons, commoning, data commons. I think what's really interesting is certainly one of the niches that we've been able to step into is we do a lot of work with GIS, with universities, creating bioregional atlases and databases where because we have a region where it's divided by in Canada and the United States, we use two different data sets, different languages, different measurements. And actually, by bringing them together, we can create a more effective resource for policy planners and other things. I think what's really cool too is that this idea of bioregional mapping, also, sorry, to Kathy's point earlier, really grows from First Nations in British Columbia that were doing a lot of mapping around sovereignty in Supreme Court cases, which they won around their territorial sovereignty, which still affect today, the Wet'suwet'en, the Unistoten, the Haida Gwaii, all of these kind of really powerful cases, and that spread. It was Doug Aberley at University of British Columbia who then helped spread it to the Gulf Islands. And that's really where we helped get these frameworks like the Salish Sea, which after, I think it started around the same time and up until 2009, 2010 actually led to the renaming. So not the Puget Sound in the US and a different name in Canada, but it became a shared body of water, which actually ignored the boundaries because it better represented this place. I think, yeah, so sorry, I'm kind of going all over the place there, but yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. So the question was examples of, yeah, sorry. So in terms of like local government, I think one of the biggest and most effective things right now is working with local governments. So in the 90s, you had Paul Shell, the Cascadia Mayor's Council. And I would say today, one of the most interesting places that we're also working with, I would say would be like King County Solid Waste Divisions, working with utilities, working with energy companies, working with, Solid Waste Division of King County, very radical. And so I think a big push is to help people move beyond sustainability of what is place-based, what's ethical, responsible, local, regional. And I think that there's also a big tie-in with resilience, and that also can have a big connection with disaster management, preparation, and planning, which it all dovetails together.
Thank you. So, I don't want to take up too much time from Karie and Brandon, but at some other point, love to answer your question, Karie, about what we all, and specifically Kirsten's doing on the local level to try and engage those communities you were talking about and to sort of empower and give them agency. But I want to stay focused on you guys and learn as much about what you're doing today. Simon, do you have go for it?
So actually, I was going to try and respond, even if briefly, to Karie's question about how we're seeing these things, but I don't want to take up too much time on this. So,
well, how about we see if there's more questions, and if not,
yeah,
then we can all
I'll
share
cede that space to more questions. But
okay,
yeah, happy to
great.
come back on that idea and explore that more.
Yes, and obviously we're big promoters of that. So, Brian, did you remember your other question?
I put it in the chat. I mean, it wasn't a question, it was a statement, basically.
Okay, no problem. So for those who haven't asked a question yet, want to just make sure everybody feels comfortable to come on screen and ask their question. I know some of you are very passionate about this subject, so hoping that you've got questions. If not, I know we've got more. So I guess Karie, is there more you want to share about how people apply or come to the Congress, and what sorts of people is it open to? Who would be most uh, suited for? I think it would be great to hear just a little bit more than what you shared before.
Sure, absolutely. It's definitely open to a broad range of folks. I kind of think about it, the bioregional movement is kind of like an umbrella for to hold many different groups working toward environmental aspects, so whether that's economists or artists or regenerative land practitioners or city government officials. It can be anybody in those spaces and more who are largely just concerned about, what's happening in our world and having a desire to want to do something about it themselves. So I think anybody who feels a call toward that is certainly welcome to attend. And it's an all ages event too. Kids are definitely welcome as well.
Great. And I think in our team meeting yesterday, either Alex or Kirsten had mentioned that there might be some other events going on in conjunction with this, or those other bioregional at the same time, or am I misunderstanding?
No, you're not. Actually, there's several things happening in September in particular, and they have named it now Bioregional. What is it, Brandon? Bioregional Coherence Month, I think it is. And one of them is Bill Bowie and R3.0's conference that's happening just a week before the Congress. And he's assembling a group from all over the world, actually, who are meeting together in these groups called Bioregional Confluencing. And then there'll be some speakers for the conference. And so he has aspirations to, after the Congress, to maybe start up like a planetary bioregional group. So we'll see where that goes. But that's happening, as well as there's another kind of bioregional event happening in Tunisia, also in September, that Joe Brewer is a part of, if you've heard of his work. And then many more in between. I would say like pretty much every continent at this point is doing something. And even in Antarctica, there's a movement to establish rights for Antarctica as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And if assuming this goes amazing and fills up exactly the way you want and all the other things, what do you see as the next step for 12, 13, or for yourself in the future of this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any other bioregional congresses will happen after this. I mean, this is there's been 10 and this is the 11th, and it's always been very grassroots, and it's been driven by who feels called to take it on for the next time around. So we're leaving that open to people to step forward if they want to. I'd love for it to keep happening. I think it's really needed. And I think it can honestly happen all over the world, as it is already starting to do. But in terms of myself, I'm going to finish up my PhD and, probably do some writing and speaking and hopefully land with the very values aligned organization that I'll ultimately work with as well.
Awesome. Brandon, any other thoughts you want to share on the Congress that's coming up, or?
Yeah, I think my hopes are is after a successful Congress, I think I might take a nap.
Me too.
Naps are great. All right. Well, last chance for questions for Karie and Brandon, and then we'll Simon and Kirsten, if you want, can share more some other thoughts. So 3, 2, 1. There you go. Simon, please, love to hear what you were going to share.
Well, first to celebrate that Congress is happening and this growing sort of movement around bioregionalism, I think it's really important. One of the things that we learned from this exercise that we did in Colombia, that it's not, we don't know the answers. It's still very exploratory. So, and it's a very different context. But one of the things they found was actually making the economic case for bioregions had an impact in terms of convincing authorities and businesses to get more involved and start backing it, and also overcome the myth of bioregions as tree huggers and hippies and that sort of thing. And if you start making the economic case for it, they found that had quite a lot of success, and then also generating investment, coming into it. So, some of the economic benefits that from bioregionalism in terms of job creation, in terms of bringing in more sustainable tourism and attracting more sustainable tourism, in terms of shorter circuits of production and consumption within a bioregion, the local ownership of businesses and how that also replicated wealth more locally, and that was quite persuasive in terms of government, municipal authorities picking up on it and starting to see the bioregion as, from what they call the perspective of bioeconomy. So that was just, I mean, it's just an idea worth exploring, and I'd love to explore that more. Because obviously it could be a controversial theme to develop, but that came out of our lessons with the work in Colombia.
Anything either of you want to comment on that? If not, I was gonna share something else, but go for it, Karie.
Well, I'm just gonna say, I think it's very difficult to get most mainstream economic thinkers away from this idea of just this insatiable growth.
Distraction. Yeah.
That's how our economy is set up, to just grow, grow, grow. But it's actually a lie. It's a lie in terms of what it can deliver, because ultimately that's only benefiting like a very small group of people and devastating many others. And you know, that's difficult. Like how are we going to get out of that? Small steps, I think. But what you're saying about reframing is like, well-being, like we can all actually live better lives if we reorganize the economy in such a way that it's not organized that way. But to move into that is going to take still many more years. And that's why I'm glad people like Wellbeing Economy Alliance is around to help us do that too. I know that's not like a real answer, but that's ultimately what the crux of the problem is, for me at least.
Yeah, and what I was going to add to that is on September 8th, we're having a conversation about future generations legislation and how to do it, looking at some of the other ones that have been done. But I'm just thinking, that framing might be really helpful to people as a way to see themselves in how bioregionalism or the metrics or other things come together, is trying to see themselves, their children, their grandchildren, etc., in what is the future world that they'd like them to have when they're there. Because I think coming at it from the economic perspective, there's probably ways to do it, but it feels very complex and convoluted. Whereas thinking about taking care of people and planet might be another frame. Anyway, inviting everybody to come to that discussion on September 8th. Jesse Green, who's not here this week, will be hosting that one. So Karie and Brandon, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
No, just if you would like to come to the event and have questions, you can reach out to me directly. We also have let me put in the email for our general mailbox that you can reach out to with questions as well. And then I'll put my email in here as well. Feel free to send me a note and answer any questions you might have.
Awesome. Brandon, any closing thoughts?
No, I think lastly, I just want to say thank you so much for having us here today. And I think there's so much more to touch on, and I would be really excited to hear about what everybody here is actually doing and how you're implementing these values. And I think that there's so much to also just be said that we didn't touch on in terms of also the need for this to be an intergenerational movement, and then also really building a long-term vision that actually outlives us. A 7-generation vision, a 500-year vision, a restorative vision that we can all be working towards, and then also really finding ways that we can be supporting youth and young people with actual pathways that they can see a viable future that they can be supported in doing this work, I think is really, really important. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, come on and join us for some of our future sessions. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming today. Let's hear it for Brandon and Karie and all the hard work they're putting into this event and all the other things they're doing year round, and hoping that you get those well-deserved naps at the end.
Yes, thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for this
Thank you
opportunity to
much.
share.